The clock on the glass desk read 1:47 in the morning, and Rowan Merritt had not moved in 4 hours. The office was dark except for the cold, relentless glow of 2 monitors casting pale light across his face. 41 floors below, downtown Toronto was doing what it always did at this hour, dissolving quietly into amber streetlights and the distant hum of the Gardiner Expressway. Up here, in the corner suite of Meridian Capital Group, there was no city. There was only the quarterly projection file he had been staring at for the better part of 3 days. Rowan pressed 2 fingers against the bridge of his nose and exhaled slowly through his teeth. The position of Chief Executive Officer of Meridian Capital had a way of making the nights feel like punishment. Not the romantic kind of punishment that people imagined when they pictured corner offices and Bay Street salaries. The real kind. The kind where you sat alone in the dark at 2 in the morning and could not remember whether you had eaten since breakfast. His phone was face up on the left side of the desk. He had been ignoring it for most of the evening. His assistant, his board liaison, his sister in Vancouver. Everyone got the same treatment after 9 o'clock. He did not have the bandwidth. He never did anymore. Then it buzzed. Not a call, a text. The screen lit up with a number he did not recognize. A 416 area code, but no name attached. Did you remember to eat tonight? Rowan stared at the message for a long moment, his jaw tightened. He had received this kind of thing before, carefully constructed, warmly worded openers designed to feel casual and concerned. He had learned what they were. Connections looking to leverage proximity, journalists running a soft approach. Occasionally someone who genuinely believed that a well-timed text message was the pathway to a meeting that his assistant had refused to schedule. He set the phone face down without responding. 20 minutes passed. The phone buzzed again. You have been in that building since 7 this morning. I counted the lights. Rowan's hand stopped moving over the keyboard. He looked at the dark screen of the phone. Then slowly he picked it up and read the message again. I counted the lights. He stood up from his chair and walked to the window. From here, looking out across the financial district, he could see the building across Richmond Street. The older low-rise with the grocery on the ground floor and the residential floors above it. If someone were standing at the right window over there, they would have a direct sight line to this office. His light was the only one still burning in the tower at this hour. It was an oddly specific thing to notice. It was an oddly specific thing to say. He looked back down at the number. No name. No context. He typed 2 words. Who is this? He waited. The reply came quickly, as though the person on the other side had been expecting the question. Some fellow thinks you should go home. Or at minimum, drink a glass of R. You look like a man running on fumes. He almost laughed. He did not, because he could not remember the last time he had done that easily either. But something in his chest shifted, just slightly. The way a window shifts when a door opens somewhere in a house you thought was sealed shut. He set the phone down without responding. But this time, he did not turn it face down. The canal pathway behind the distillery district was quiet on weekday mornings, and Simone Audit preferred it that way. She pushed her delivery cart along the uneven stone, the insulated bag strapped across her back, 2 small orders balanced in the front basket. The morning route was hers. Had been for 8 months now, ever since the catering company she had worked for folded without notice and she had needed something immediate. Something that paid weekly and didn't require a reference she no longer had. The delivery job was not what she had planned for herself at 32. But then very little was. She had planned at 32 to be somewhere in her 2nd year of a master's degree in urban planning at the University of Toronto. She had been accepted. She had deferred once, when her father had his first cardiac event, and deferred again when the costs multiplied in ways she hadn't anticipated. The acceptance letter was still in the drawer of her kitchen table. She had stopped looking at it sometime around the 4th month. The morning orders were mostly corporate. Breakfast packages to office towers, catering runs to early board meetings. She knew the lobbies better than some of the people who worked in them. The lobby at Meridian Capital's building, the Castaway Tower, 41 floors of glass and steel on Bay Street, she knew particularly well. There was a security guard named Harold who always held the service entrance open for her without being asked. There was a particular elevator that ran faster than the others. And there was a light on the top floor, in the corner suite, that was almost always still burning when she arrived at 6:45 in the morning. She had started noticing it the way you notice anything you see every single day. Then she had started thinking about it, Then, one night in September, coming back past the building on her bicycle after a late errand, she had looked up and seen it still on at 1:45 in the morning. She had gone home. She had found the corporate contact listed on the Meridian website. She had typed a text message to the main executive line. Half certain it would go to some assistant's work phone. Half certain she was being absurd. "Did you remember to eat tonight?" She had not expected a response. She had certainly not expected the conversation that followed. Rowan did not mention the messages to anyone. This was not unusual. He did not generally mention things to people. He had built his professional life on a kind of disciplined containment. Information released only when useful, emotion expressed only when strategic. His board respected it. His colleagues had learned to read it. The women he had dated in his 30s had, eventually, grown tired of it. But the messages kept coming, not every night, not even every other night. Intermittently, the way a thoughtful person checks in rather than the way someone runs a campaign. One evening, she sent him a photograph, taken from across the street, slightly blurry, of his office window lit up against a dark sky, with the caption, "Evidence." For the record. He had stared at that photograph for a long time. He typed back, "You take photos of office buildings at midnight?" Her reply came after a few minutes. "Only the ones where someone is clearly living inside them against their will." He had no response to that. He put the phone down. He looked at the city outside the glass. Something about the exchange left a residue he could not quite name. Not discomfort, exactly, but the feeling of being seen without having consented to it, which was an unsettling experience for a man who had spent the better part of a decade making sure that didn't happen. He started, almost against his will, to look forward to the messages. He would not have admitted that to anyone. He did not fully admit it to himself. But he noticed that he checked his phone more than he used to, and that when the screen was dark, the office felt a degree or two colder. The incident happened on a Wednesday in November. Rowan had been in back-to-back meetings since 8 in the morning. By 2 in the afternoon, he needed coffee badly enough to take the elevator down to the building's ground-floor cafe himself, rather than asking someone to bring it up. He did this occasionally when he needed a 10-minute reset. The anonymity of moving through a lobby without anyone expecting something from him. The cafe was mid-afternoon busy. He stood in line behind 2 junior analysts who did not recognize him, which was exactly what he wanted. He ordered a black coffee. He stepped to the side to wait. That was when he heard it. A man's voice, thick with the particular aggression of someone who felt entitled to an audience, rose above the ambient noise of the coffee machines. "I asked for oat milk, not regular oat milk. Is that concept genuinely beyond you?" Rowan turned. Behind the counter, a young woman in a dark apron was holding a drink cup with both hands. She was standing very still. Her expression was controlled, the practiced stillness of someone who had learned to hold themselves together in exactly this kind of situation. The man on the other side of the counter was in his 50s, broad-shouldered, wearing a wool coat that cost more than the barista probably made in a month. He had the specific look of someone accustomed to his anger being accommodated. "I apologize," the woman said quietly. "I'll remake it right away." "You've wasted my time," the man said. He gestured toward the cup still in her hand. "Put it down. You're going to spill it on yourself." She set the cup on the counter. She reached for a fresh one. The man leaned forward and deliberately knocked the original cup off the counter with his elbow. The cold coffee hit the floor with a crack. The lid flew. The liquid spread across the tile, and across the woman's shoes and the lower hem of her apron. The cafe went very quiet. "Clean that up," the man said. He was already looking at his phone. Rowan set his own coffee cup down on the nearest table. He walked to the counter. He did not raise his voice. He had never needed to. "Step back from the counter," Rowan said. The man looked up from his phone with the expression of someone who had expected to be invisible. Then he registered who was speaking, and the expression changed. "Mr. Merritt," the man started. "Step back," Rowan said again, the same tone, the same volume. The man stepped back. Rowan looked at the woman behind the counter. She was looking at him with an expression he could not immediately read. Not quite relief, not quite surprise, something more guarded than either of those. He looked at her face. He looked at her hand still gripping the fresh cup. He knew that face. He didn't know how he knew it. The recognition arrived the way these things sometimes do. Not as a clear memory, but as a physical certainty. A pull at the back of the mind like a hook catching in dark water. He turned back to the man in the wool coat. "Your name is on the lease of the third-floor office suite," Rowan said. I know this because I reviewed the building's tenant agreements last month. You have 30 days remaining on that lease. Whether it's renewed is a decision that crosses my desk." He paused, apologized to her. "Then leave." The man apologized. It was not a good apology, but it was an apology. He left. The cafe began to breathe again, the soft collective exhale of people returning to their phones and their conversations, grateful the disruption was over. Rowan turned back to the counter. The woman was already crouching, picking up the broken cup and the ice from the floor. He walked around to the side of the counter, past the small hinged gate that separated the service area, and crouched down beside her. "You don't have to do that," she said, without looking up. "I know," he said. He picked up the lid. "Are you all right?" She sat back on her heels and looked at him directly for the first time. She had dark eyes, and they were very steady. A strand of dark hair had come loose from the knot at the back of her neck. "I'm fine," she said. "You're not, but that's a reasonable thing to say." He stood up and offered her the pieces he'd collected. "What's your name?" She hesitated for half a beat. "Simone." He stood very still. Simone. The recognition that had been circling at the back of his mind suddenly arrived, fully formed and with force. He thought of a basement apartment in the annex. The one he'd rented with 2 other students in his second year of his undergraduate degree, when his scholarship had been cut by a third and he had not known what to do. He thought of the family upstairs, the father who had let him do his laundry in their machine without charging him, the mother who had sent down food on Sunday evenings, just extra, she always said, "We always make extra," and the daughter, a teenager then, quiet and serious, doing homework at the kitchen table whenever he came upstairs to return a dish, who had once, without a word, pushed a plate of food across the table toward him when she noticed he wasn't eating. She had been 14. He had been 20. He stared at the woman in front of him. "Simone Audit," he said. It was not a question. She looked at him. Something shifted in her expression, a complicated flicker of things she didn't let reach her face. "Hello, Rowan," she said quietly. He did not sleep that night. He sat in the corner of his office. Not at his desk, but in the single armchair by the window he almost never used, and he looked at the city and tried to organize what he felt into something manageable. This was what he did with things that threatened to become unmanageable. He categorized. He assessed. He made them smaller. It wasn't working. He thought about Simone's father's apartment, the smell of the hallway on Sunday evenings, the way her mother had called him dear, casually, without ceremony, the way you called someone dear when you simply thought they were. He had not been called that since, not once, and he had told himself for 20 years that it didn't matter. He thought about the morning he had left for his position in Calgary, the first job, the real start of everything, and the way he had told himself he would call, would come back, would not lose touch. He thought about the way the years had accumulated without him noticing, until it was no longer plausible to claim the gap was accidental. He looked at his phone. No messages tonight. The screen was dark. He picked it up and opened the thread. He stared at the most recent message, still unanswered from 3 days ago. "You missed the sunset again. It was actually good tonight." He typed, "I need to tell you something." The reply came faster than he expected. "Okay, I recognized you today. I should have said so immediately. I don't know why I didn't." A long pause. "I know." He read those 2 words 4 times. "You knew when?" "When you walked around the counter." He sat with that for a moment. "Why didn't you say anything?" The reply took longer this time. "Because you looked at me the way people look at someone they feel guilty about. And I didn't want that from you. I never wanted that." Rowan stared at the message. Something in his chest, some old calcified thing, cracked quietly in the dark. He typed, "I owe your family more than I've ever said out loud." She did not respond that night. He didn't blame her. 4 days passed in a strange suspension. Rowan moved through his week mechanically. Meetings, calls, the quarterly projections that still needed to be finalized by Thursday. He functioned. He had always been very good at functioning. But underneath the function, something had destabilized. A groundwater shift, invisible at the surface. He thought about the woman behind the counter, the steadiness in her dark eyes, the controlled stillness she had held through the worst of it. The way she had said, "I'm fine," with the particular flatness of someone who had said it many times before in many different situations. He thought about the delivery bike he had seen chained to the post outside the building on Wednesday mornings. He hadn't connected it to her until now. On the 5th day, he called the building's cafe manager, a quiet conversation, professionally framed, and asked a few careful questions. He learned that Simone worked the morning counter shift 4 days a week and did delivery runs the other 3. He learned that she had been with the building contractor for 8 months. He learned, without asking directly, that she had once mentioned deferring a graduate program. That evening, he sent her a message. "I'd like to have a conversation, a real one. Coffee, somewhere that isn't my building's lobby, if you're willing." The reply came back 12 minutes later. "I'm willing." They met at a small cafe on Queen Street West, her choice which he respected. She arrived in a dark coat with her hair down for the first time he could remember, and she looked nothing like the woman behind the counter and exactly like herself. They sat across from each other, and for the first minute neither of them spoke. Then Simone said, "You don't have to do this, Rowan. I'm not asking for anything." "I know you're not," he said. "That's partly why I wanted to." She looked at him steadily. "I left without a real goodbye," he said. "I told myself I'd come back. I told myself I'd call." He stopped. "I didn't, and I've spent a long time not looking at that directly." "People move on," she said. "That's not a crime. I moved on from people who were kind to me when I had nothing," he said. "That's a different thing." She was quiet for a moment. Outside the window, Queen Street moved past. Cyclists, a streetcar, 2 people arguing in a friendly way over a parking spot. "My father talks about you sometimes," she said finally. "He always says you were going to do something real. He was right." A small pause. He had another cardiac episode in August. "He's all right, but the recovery was." She stopped. "It's expensive. Being all right is expensive." "I know," he said it simply, without the weight of an offer, which was how she needed to hear it. She looked at him. "I'm not telling you that so you'll do something about it." "I know that too," he said. She looked at her coffee. She looked back at him. Something shifted in her expression, not softening, exactly, but a small deliberate lowering of the thing she kept up between herself and the world. "You really didn't know it was me," she said, "when you used to come upstairs." "I knew you," he said. "I just didn't know I'd carry it." She didn't say anything to that. But she didn't look away. The following weeks were not what Rowan had expected. He had half anticipated that the honesty of that conversation would create a new kind of distance, the polite, careful distance that settles between people after something real has been said. Instead, the messages continued. They changed slightly. Less the anonymous warmth of a stranger, looking out for someone. More the particular rhythm of 2 people who were finally being direct with each other. She told him about the deferred program. He listened without immediately producing a solution, which cost him something, because producing solutions was what he did. He asked her questions instead, about what the program was, what she had wanted from it, what she had been planning before the deferrals began to stack. She told him that talking to him at 2 in the morning through a phone screen had been easier, in some ways, because she hadn't had to look at him while she did it. He said he understood. He wasn't sure she believed him. He wasn't entirely sure he deserved to be believed. One morning, he arrived early to the office and found that someone had left a takeaway cup of coffee on the security desk with his name written on it in black marker. Harold, the morning guard, told him it had been left by the delivery woman who came on Wednesday mornings. Rowan stood in the lobby and looked at the cup for a moment. He turned it around and saw that something was written on the back, small and slightly uneven, in the same black marker. "You still look like a man running on fumes." I thought this might help. He carried it upstairs. He set it on the corner of his desk, not the coffee which he drank, but the cup itself, and he left it there for the rest of the day. 3 months after the afternoon in the cafe lobby, Rowan asked Simone to meet him for dinner. Not coffee, not a quick conversation in a neutral location. He said dinner, and he named a restaurant on King Street that he had been to once for a client event, and that he remembered because the lighting was quiet and the tables were spaced far enough apart to have a real conversation. She said yes. She arrived in a gray dress that she wore without apology, and she was already seated when he got there. Early, he realized, which was something he hadn't expected and liked immediately. They ordered. They talked. They talked through the first course and most of the second with an ease that surprised him, and probably should not have, because by then they had been talking for months. They had simply done it through a small glass screen. Toward the end of the meal, Rowan reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and set something on the table between them. It was a photograph, slightly blurry, taken from across a street at night, an office tower, one lit window at the top. She looked at it. She looked up at him. "I printed it," he said. "The one you sent me, in September." He paused. "I don't know why I held on to it. I think I needed a record of the moment something changed. I didn't know yet what had changed. I just knew something had. Simone looked at the photograph for a long moment. She reached out and touched the edge of it with one finger. I almost didn't send that first message, she said. I thought you'd think I was strange. I did think you were strange, he said. She laughed. It was the first time he had heard her laugh fully. Not the quiet, contained kind, but the unguarded kind. And it moved through the restaurant like light coming through a window that had been stuck shut for a long time. I thought about you, she said, when the laugh had settled. When I saw that window every morning, I thought, whoever that is, they're in there alone, and they don't have to be. He looked at her across the table. I know I don't have standing to ask you for anything, he said carefully. I disappeared from your family's life and I don't have a good explanation for why. I'm not going to dress it up. No, she agreed. Don't, but I'm asking anyway, he said. If you're willing. She looked at him for a long, still moment. Outside the restaurant, King Street moved past. A late bus, two people walking close together under a shared umbrella, the ordinary Tuesday night motion of a city doing what cities do. My father would be insufferable about this, she said finally. You know that. I'm prepared for that, he said. She reached across the table and took the photograph. She held it for a moment, then set it back down in front of him. The light was on again this morning, she said. In case you were wondering. He looked at her. He did not say everything he wanted to say. Not yet, not tonight. But for once, that was not because he was containing it. It was because there was time and he was finally willing to use it. He reached out and covered her hand with his. Outside, the city carried on beneath a low November sky. Indifferent and luminous, the way cities always are. But inside the restaurant, in the quiet space between two people who had found their way back to each other through the smallest, most human of things, the world had settled into something it had not been for either of them in a very long time. Warm and unhurried and real.